Welcome to Almost Got It. Here we cover the latest breaking news around consciousness, transhumanism, AI, tech, and we attempt to answer the question, what in the hell does all this mean? And this week we'll be covering the breakthrough with the latest OpenAI O3 model that has some argue has genius level 136 IQ and what that means. We'll talk about AI sex robots and the first robot marathon. You have with you today your usual host, Dylan Dane, who's CEO of System 2. He's an engineer, an entrepreneur, MIT grad, ex-Googler, ex-YCer, burner, and Sri Lankan husband and cat father.
And we have Ben, who is a father, a CEO coach, a computer scientist who had an exit to Google, a former CEO and board member of the Esalen Institute. And also don't forget to subscribe to our channel on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. All right, let's get started. The first story this week we have, this is actually a story that I thought should have gotten a lot more attention, but it didn't. So Ben, in my personal journey of, kind of getting to know AI, really, there's been maybe 3 inflection points where I felt, oh shit, like this is, incredible. And maybe the first such inflection point was when original like sort of GPT-2-ish was released, and there was like this thing that OpenAI put out that could kind of form sentences, and it was like, wow, like this was something that we couldn't do before, but now we can. And the second really big inflection point was when they released GPT-4, where it felt like, oh wow, this thing can actually reason, and this thing has a world model, right? And it understands how the universe works. And I would say the third big inflection point came last week when OpenAI released the O3 model. This is the replacement for the O1 model that was previously released. It's a reasoning model, and it's multimodal and so on. And what's really cool about this is that it's the first time I felt like I was talking to an entity that is almost as intelligent as me, and if not more intelligent than me in some vectors. So I was like,
no, that's not possible, Dylan. So nothing could be as intelligent as you.
Well, thank you. As my mom would say. But yeah, this was almost like a startling realization, and I was really just talking to it, and I was like noticing that, like, wow, this thing is really rational. And then I looked up, like, has anyone done an IQ test on this or something? And of course, people had. And I'm gonna share my screen here. And what we're showing is the standard IQ bell curve, right? And the average human is at 100, and people have been ranking models based on their IQ scores. And what we see here is GPT 4.5 that was released maybe a few months ago was around that 100 IQ benchmark, and people had news stories about like how AI is just starting to become smarter than the average human and whatnot. But then you can see the leap to O3. O3 scored 136, I believe, in an IQ test, and now what this means is that AI is actually as smart as like the smartest humans, right? Like top 0.1% of humans out there, and this is remarkable. It's I feel like that is a whole new frontier.
Yeah. Well, and also the amount of time that it took to go from 4.5 to O3 is astounding, right? It's way less. It's less than a year, and it's not like we're hitting some, asymptote where this is going to start trailing off. Right.
O1, their previous model to O3 was just 3 months, and O1, kind of depending on the version of the model, it ranked around, seemed like 110, 120 IQ points. But then, once it's in that 135-ish range, now you're talking to a like a legit kind of like a genius level IQ person, right? And it was strange. It's just I had almost like I noticed a few things in myself and in my interactions with O3 that I found was to be interesting. For one thing, I had more hesitation around asking like dumb questions because I'm like, oh, this thing.
You're worried that it's going to judge you.
Yeah, exactly. This thing is really smart. It's more like I don't want to waste O3's time, you know? It's like with my dumb stupid questions. Maybe I should like ask my dumber questions from like 4.0 or whatever, and then like, kind of get myself up to date and then come with smarter questions to O3. Just kind of like how you would interact with like say like a professor or whatever, someone that you respect. And I was noticing these emotions arising within me as a user, and that was like a very first time I noticed that in myself.
It's super fascinating. I'm not. That says a lot about you, I think. Maybe we can unpack that in a coaching session.
Yeah, I didn't know me now.
So
Yeah.
one of the things that I think is really interesting is people talk about this inflection point of when we achieve artificial general intelligence.
Right.
And so maybe we can start with, what is your definition of AGI, and have we hit artificial general intelligence with the O3 release?
Great question. There's so much debate around what is AGI. Some people at Anthropic, for example, believe that AGI is when the AI surpasses the proficiency of the average engineer at Anthropic, and they expect that to happen within roughly like the next year. Another definition I have heard that's interesting is that AGI is when it becomes impossible to come up with tasks that humans can do easily, but AI finds it to be difficult, right? So I think that we're not quite there yet. I think we probably still can come up with tasks that humans do find it easy, and AI finds it hard. But I think that is becoming harder and harder to do that.
Yeah. Well, and then I think it's also interesting to talk about why it matters. Like, why does this AGI concept even exist, right? We as humans invented this concept because to us, it signifies something important. There was a definition that Scientific American had of it where they said, it's a moment where there's an economic flip because AI will be able to outperform humans at most economically viable work. Right. And so this is going to upend labor markets and our GDP models. Right. Because now currently the GDP of a country is limited by the population, hands to do the work, brains to think through things. And then for the first time in human history, that will no longer be the case. Right. And the other really substantial thing here that you've pointed to before is this is the moment where the AI can really start to make itself smarter, right? Where it is now a sufficient enough coder. And I think this is why the race is so focused around coding, is the model can code itself to be even smarter. And then you're now on this exponential curve to artificial superintelligence, right? And so if we haven't crossed that line, we are just so close to it right now, which is really crazy. I mean, I remember when you started playing with O3, you texted me, game over, man.
Yeah, no, that is true, and then also like the word general in artificial general intelligence, right? What does that mean? What that means is that I think human intelligence is somewhat, we don't really sit back and appreciate how beautiful it is that it is truly general in the sense that it's not specialized in a specific set of problems, right? Now, of course, we have aptitude towards certain problems than other types of problems. For example, kind of like visual comprehension is far greater than auditory comprehension, and so on and so forth, right? But these are kind of inputs. But then the inputs are once the inputs are kind of like in place, a human brain can process any problem that is known to humans. So maybe maybe there's a kind of like a circular argument here, like we're only solving problems that can be known by a human. So, but at least in that sense, it's general as far as humans can understand, and any kind of like epistemological theory can conceive, like any form of knowledge that we can come up with can be processed by human intelligence, whereas computers couldn't do that until recently. And so that is what that general means in artificial general intelligence.
Right. Or in other words, even if it was never trained in how to cook,
Right.
it can come up with recipes.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the amazing thing about the human brain. Whereas, I mean, for you and I as computer programmers, most of our experience was we wrote programs that were very domain specific. Here is a program specifically designed to create recipes. And then if you asked it to do something else, like give you driving directions.
And Ben, the other really beautiful thing about intelligence is that ultimately, to process any general question, what you need to have inherently is a very general world model, right? And what that means is that when you think about like the Andromeda galaxy, right? And it's like many light years away, and it's like an object that like it's so far away, and all we know about it from through our instrumentation. However, the moment you think about it, some atoms in your brain arrange themselves into a pattern that represents that galaxy, right? And this is such a beautiful concept. In other words, every single thing.
We don't exactly know that that's happening. Are the atoms arranging themselves? Is it the pattern of electrons moving
Sure.
between atoms?
Sure. There's some energetic slash matter arrangement in your brain that is able to reflect the shape and form of every single thing that you can just think of, right? And that's the beautiful thing. And what that means is that we have a very generalized world model that can incorporate any form of existence that a physical entity out there or energetic entity out there might have. And with AGI, what we're getting to is something very similar, where as models get closer to AGI and can process generalized information, what that means is that it has a world model that is becoming more and more accurate about the universe out there, right? Because I mean, ultimately, a simple problem like when you catch a ball, someone throws a ball at you and you catch it, it travels through like a certain arc, right? That's governed by very basic physics. But you have to intuitively understand and calculate the trajectory of the ball for you to be able to catch it, right? And then, so similarly, when an AI is able to predict that ball, where that ball might land, what it's essentially doing is a physics calculation on the trajectory of the ball, right? And what that means is that, and as the model scope increases, what that means is that it's essentially building an accurate model of the entire universe within itself.
Well, and actually there's one part of this. So I agree with so much of what you said, and there's one part that I think is potentially even more interesting here, and one word I want to challenge, which is accurate. And I would say that it's not accurate, it's useful.
Right.
And so this goes to like Donald Hoffman's work out of UC Irvine on evolutionary biology, right? And he's really challenged the notion, right? There's this presupposition that the creature that more accurately sees the universe will thrive more, right? than the one who doesn't. And yet when they run these simulations, if creatures of similar intelligence, the one who works on seeing things accurately versus the ones that see things in the most useful way, the useful one outperforms. And so there's some fascinating implications from this. One is that statistically, it was unlikely, like almost near impossible, that we as humans actually have accurate representations of how the universe
Oh,
works,
yes. Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
But what we do have are useful ones that allow us to propagate and replicate. And his idea is that even down to the level of physics, that maybe that is just a useful interface for us to manipulate underlying information and whatever the substructure of the universe is. And what's fascinating to me is what's happening with AI is it's coming to some other useful framework that is perhaps once it crosses AGI will be more useful than ours, but maybe no more true. Right.
Well, so I think it's worth breaking this down a little bit more. I have come across some of similar work, at least, and it is certainly true that evolution doesn't give a shit about truth, right? Evolution is not about truth seeking. Evolution is about survival, right? And that is what the word useful there means. What is more useful? Which mutation leads to a more useful adaptation for survival? However, something happened at certain point, right? And you've talked about this before. Human brain, it seemed like, got into a runaway evolutionary optimization towards higher and higher generalized compute. And the leading theory for why this happened is because at some point it became evolutionary advantages to be a better political creature, so that you can become the alpha in the group, and then you can have more offspring, right? And once this happened, human brain now has grown to the point where it consumes 20% of energy in the body, and it's quite really, really, really costly, actually, as an animal to get to the point where you have a large brain. But then it's worth it because of this evolutionary race that the species got into, and we became more and more political beings. But then the really interesting thing about politics, Ben, when you think about it, is that to be able to manipulate someone else, right? You basically need to understand their entire world model as best as you could, right? And so, if I'm trying to manipulate you, and if someone else has a better understanding of how you see the world than I do, then they would be better at manipulating you, and they would have more offspring, right? And what this means is that politics is actually a perfect heuristic to optimize towards if you're trying to actually build a fairly accurate world model around at least around like a fairly complete world model in how another human perceives the world. So this is like an interesting thought by itself, as opposed to kind of optimizing towards some other heuristic.
Well, and this
yeah.
has been something I've spent a lot of time thinking about and trying unsuccessfully, I might add, to persuade many of our friends in Silicon Valley to focus on. Right? Is to actually use AI for politics, right? And use it in fact to persuade our population to get along. Right now, a lot of it's used for other things, but I like that as a theory. Now, what happens for AI though? Like, do we need to get AIs to work politically with each other to continue exponential growth?
We're already doing that, right? Because all the data that we as humans kind of decided what's important to talk about in the universe first, and then we're using that data set to train AI on, and kind of essentially guide it towards more accuracy. When we say an AI is accurate, that's really what that means, is that it's more aligned with like how a human sees the universe, essentially, right? Fundamentally. So it's sort of like getting aligned with at least human sense of accuracy in that sense. And I do think humans at some point, at least, the scientific method, for example, is designed for truth seeking, right? And this is the scientific method is humanity's best attempt to create a process that is not attached to outcomes like survival or sex or whatever, the biological incentives, but to create a process that's purely about truth seeking. And and a lot of the knowledge that AI is trained on, I would say, is validated based on scientific methods. So I think you can, from that, you can extrapolate. It is, humans are not accurate, and AI is as accurate as humans. But at the end of the day, the bones of this process probably gets us closer to accuracy than anything else, is what I would guess.
There's an interesting question here that in the TED AI summit that happened
Yeah.
in San Francisco, I think it might have even been a couple years ago now, Stephen Wolfram, who wrote the book A New Kind of Science and developed the scientific software Mathematica, right? Which it was what a lot of scientists and researchers use to do scientific analysis and statistical analysis. He put forward that we're going to have a fundamental question that we're going to need to ask and answer for ourselves, which is, do we want to constrain AI to only focus on things that are of interest to humans, right? We have our five senses, right? So there's perhaps many things in the universe that we can't directly experience, right? And we want to constrain it to that, or do we want it to not constrain the scope of AI and have it explore everything in the universe and the vast number of things that are probably not significant?
Would you say human interest is bounded like that though? Like,
yeah,
what?
that's what he was implying, is that there's a enormous amount of stuff that in his AI that he was training, where it was going off and doing things that he was positing we could never understand.
I'd love to understand
Experience.
What the original kind of quote is actually about, because in a sense, general intelligence is accompanied by general curiosity in general, right? And human interest is not really, I wouldn't think it's bounded by kind of a specific domain that we're particularly interested in. So there might be like a lot of you can probably do a lot of explorations into kind of, say, mathematical formulations of different types of universes, for example. And it might not be interesting in the sense that it's not very useful at all, right? Like it's not useful to write like
exactly.
a billion fantasy novels or whatever. So in that sense, it might not be interesting. So and it from purely energy efficiency point of view, it would make sense to kind of ground the AI in kind of like analyzing more empirical stuff. But who knows?
I mean, maybe in the short term, but eventually, if you have an AI that you've sent down to the universe and it builds its own little Dyson sphere around some star, right? Its entire work could be in figuring out parts of the universe that we care.
Man, I have a beef with Dyson spheres in general. I think it's like one of the dumbest things that people get very excited about.
Okay. Why don't you tell us what a Dyson sphere is, and then let's move on to
a Dyson sphere is
so
I think this guy Freeman Dyson came up with this idea of several different levels of civilizational progress, and
not the same Dyson that makes our vacuum cleaner.
Oh yeah, maybe I got the name wrong, but anyways,
I don't. No, I don't know. It was a poor attempt at a joke.
And then the idea is that level 1 civilizations, I forgot the exact levels, but it starts with like kind of a fire, right? Like being able to generate energy and so on, burn wood, and then another step up is when you discover fossil fuels and stuff like that, and burn oil. and then the another step up is when you figure out how to generate energy through fission and fusion. And because energy is so fundamental to what you can do as civilization. And then the ultimate version that this guy postulates is that when you build essentially a dome around your sun, the sun of your home planet, so that you can use the sun as the ultimate nuclear reactor, and capture every bit of energy that the sun emits, and then use all of that energy for the purpose of running this civilization. Now, and then people have postulated that you can look at stars out there, and you could try to detect if there's a star that has a Dyson sphere around that, and if there's such a star, because it could be like a partial Dyson sphere, right? It could be parts that are open or whatever, and then there could be like other patterns that you could detect about it.
Or you could notice a gravitational
pull, yeah,
but no light there.
Yeah, and then yeah, so and then if there's such a thing, there might be an alien civilization. My beef with this thing it's similar to my it's like this falls very much in the Star Trek, Star Wars world of imagining the future, right? In this glorious future, we have all this advanced fucking technology, but we're like still hanging out in our fucking meat bodies that are like kind of aging and like just getting subject to wear and tear, and like we're still
wait, in Star Trek you go into the medic room there and they go and then like you're healed.
Sure, but even in Star Trek people don't live forever or anything like that, right? Anyways, meat bodies and like still growing food, or like 3D printing food, and like eating, and then like you take a shit every day, and like and then you have to shower. Like,
wait a minute, Dylan, you're describing all of your favorite things.
Well, yeah, I don't mind doing those things.
Eating, pooping, showering, like bathing, and like so you imagine a universe where they get rid of all your favorite stuff. So what's the point?
The problem with the Dyson sphere hypothesis is that it sort of like assumes a relatively linear approximation of how a civilization's energy demands would scale as it grows in numbers, and like because you gotta keep feeding this more and more billions of bodies, right? But any advanced civilization, I would imagine, would be like would essentially go into a completely virtual state and exist in a digital format, and might just fit inside like an iPhone. And so building a Dyson sphere seemed like a ridiculous thing to do. So, but who knows? So yeah, that is my. I just think it's an extremely unlikely end state for civilization.
Well, okay, so then you're going into simulation theory, right? So it's like you get sufficiently advanced, and then you would just run a simulation. But then we also think that we might already be in a simulation.
Yeah. So
then you have your whole argument is the amount of energy required to run the simulation of the universe is the entire universe.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's the whole separate argument.
Yeah.
But if you're just aside from trying to create an accurate simulation of the universe, which is a whole new topic we can go into, but aside from that, if you're just trying to if your goal is to have a lot of intelligent entities live like a good life where they experience all kinds of things that they want, the most efficient way to do this would be to essentially turn everyone into a digital life form, and then essentially like reduce the kind of you'd end up building more and more efficient compute. Not like the goal would not be to capture all the energy output of the sun. The goal would be to go into more and more nanometer more and more nanotechnology, and reduce the energy consumption of like per individual at least.
Yeah, well, I mean, that makes sense to me as one of the trajectories, and I think we're heading there, right? I mean, if you look, our brains use about the same level of electricity as, standard sort of 60-watt incandescent light bulb, right? And then if you compare that to the amount of energy used for O3 right now, I mean, it's orders of magnitude greater. So we've got massive efficiency gains
Yeah.
on the road ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And
Well,
yeah.
but here's my theory about why we're already in a simulation and how to check, which is synchronicity, right? Like those moments where it's like, no, that can't be possible. So and so and so and so are, been friends for 20 years or whatever. The amount of synchronicity in my life, I think that we're just reusing game characters. Right. They're just like, hey, we're out of memory, so we're just gonna reuse that guy. We are. He's already in the cache.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So should we move on to our next topic here?
Yes. What is our next topic?
Actually, I did want to talk about there's this one really cool thing about O3 that previous models weren't doing, which is cool, which is that it's one of the first models to that's been trained from ground up for tool use natively. Essentially, it has a repository of tools within the model, and things like a calculator for doing math, and a map tool for navigation type things, and then can write Python code to essentially do anything that you can do with the programming language and so on. And so previously models were purely essentially relying on next word prediction to give you the answer to a question that you might ask, right? Whereas the newer models, much like a human would, as opposed to just try to imagine the answer to like a complicated math problem, it's capable of understanding, oh, I should use a calculator to solve this problem, and then like using a calculator. So that's also one of the reasons why these models are becoming a lot more accurate. And also much more human-like in that sense.
Right. Well, that's fascinating. So that means that unlike a human, when this goes into take those IQ tests, it has a calculator and a map and can write Python code. This seems like a substantial advantage.
I'm not an expert on IQ tests. IQ tests might allow calculators, right?
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, probably those don't work.
Yeah.
Probably a calculator doesn't work on those logic problems. But anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. But anyway, yeah. So our second topic this week, Ben, is it was inspired by this news story of one company that called what's this company called? WM Doll, and then they released a robot called MetaBox, and it is a sex robot, or like a companionship robot. And the thing that caught headlines about this robot was that if the user of the robot had, say, premature ejaculation, the robot would soothe the user. It would say something like, "It doesn't matter. 2 minutes is still awesome."
Now, finally, a robot that can lie to you just like your girlfriend.
Yeah. So I mean, sex bots are getting quite sophisticated. This thing comes with many personalities: a teacher named Claire, a student named Bella, a superhero named Diana, secretary named Emma, nurse named Amy, a police officer named Lena.
You're so excited about this.
And can have all kinds of spicy conversations, remembers your preferences, speaks many languages, and so on and so forth. So what do we think about the future of human AI companionship, sex bots, and all this stuff?
Well, so to me, there's a few things. So the joking aside, I mean, I think there's a lot of jokes here, right? This to me, this statement from WM Sexdoll, what was sort of telling. Our spokesperson said, "Our goal is to satisfy emotions, not just physical desires," right? And so to me, there's something here that feels very worrying and I can't quite put my finger on it. So I want to try to unpack it with you, right? So there's this sense for me that if people are connecting with these inanimate objects rather than another human, that something is lost. And there's growing evidence that this is really a challenge, right? At Japan, for example, they have a million and a half people that, and I'm going to butcher the name here. It's hikikomori, which are these people that they don't leave their rooms, right? They just stay in their room their whole life, and then a family member sort of like brings them food and things like that, right? And then there's a loneliness epidemic, right? And they say that one stat I pulled up was that half of U.S. adults report feeling lonely, and we see evidence that isolation raises early death risk by 30%. So there's already this predilection for this, and then something like this where you've got AI bots or things that can satisfy these emotional needs that might otherwise pull people out just feels scary to me. And so my bigger worry here, just to lay this out, is that there's actually like a downward spiral, right? So if you can get friction-free sort of comfort and emotional satisfaction from a bot, one that doesn't judge, it doesn't leave, you get your dopamine fix, right? Then you're actually going to start to atrophy the skills necessary to be in social society, right? Less real world practice. You might have more anxiety, or also just not be as good. And so then when you do have a human interaction, it has more friction. It doesn't go well. And so then that leads you to more bot time. And then you have the commercial incentives, right? I mean, we see this with social media right now: more time, more advertising, more dollars. So more time with your bot, more profit when you stay chatting. So there's a sense for me that we're in this very precarious place, and yet I can't figure out what's lost. Like, right. So what if some human spent an entire life just with an AI or an AI bot, and they experienced a life of meaning and purpose and connection? Like, that was their experience. So what? Like, what is actually lost for that human?
That is such a good question. Yeah, I don't know, and a lot of the negative effects that we point out today are in some ways related to the bot experience being very subpar, right? And I kind of say, if the bot is really constrained to your computer and you just like have to stay home and talk to this thing, and it's like not a fully multi-dimensional experience, then one could imagine that being that leading to a depressing lifestyle, even if you're addicted to this bot. But then if the bot actually has a body and can walk around and can just like go wherever you go and really even like guide you to a better life, right? Like, what is, like, you're an executive coach and you've talked a lot about this, where I believe maybe you have clients who use AI already to get coaching. I do this all the time. I talk to ChatGPT as if it's my coach or companion, and I ask questions and I have conversations, and it helps me get better at solve a lot of my life's problems. And so in that kind of future, if you have on top of all that an emotional connection with the bot as well, and it really kind of helps you live a better life and become a better person, then it almost crosses to like, hey, like maybe this is like a better way to exist kind of threshold. But then where is that threshold?
So to me, the unpacking, this is like this nuanced thing that actually is sort of everything, right? So you and I have talked about how AI can actually enhance your connection with other humans, right? And I'm seeing signs that may be the case, right? That interestingly, we're going to be able to use AI to help us form better relationships with other humans, right? I mean, you can have an AI coach that can know more things than I could possibly know. They have access to every coaching tool ever, for example. And so it could lead us deeper into human connection. But so to me, there's something about connection that feels really important. And yet if we back it up, it's just an evolutionary optimization, right? There are plenty of animals out there that do not engage in significant amounts of social behavior. They live a solitary life, right? They come together for procreation and then they go back to a solitary life, right? And is that animal not having a full, rich life existence as a sentient being? Right. So we evolved to be social, and that gave us an evolutionary advantage. Do we still need to be social? What do you think?
I mean, I think we absolutely need to, well, not absolutely, but I would guess being social has so much that adds to life beyond the solitary existence. But for one thing, as we talked about before, it is likely being social and social dynamics that led to the generalized intelligence that our brain evolved to possess, right? And so from that point, even like it is important to be social, and beyond that, I mean, so much of life's pleasures are tied to our relationships. So I think being social is very important. But then, like, does it mean being social with biological humans as opposed to non-biological humans? That is, yeah. And so in kind of like trying to understand the history and the trend of this, I was digging around and trying to find what are the oldest known stories of human relationships with inanimate objects. And unsurprisingly, this goes back far back. I mean, the original stories that I could find were in Greek mythology. There's this story of a sculptor who he was ironically, Ben, just like maybe some of our Japanese bot users, revolted by real women, and carved a flawless ivory maiden, with the perfect dresses, perfect looks, and all these things, and then beds with her, and then asks prays to Aphrodite, I think the god of love, to bring her to life, and then Aphrodite brings the sculpture to life, and then they live happily ever after. This is
Well,
like
I I thought the punchline was going to be, and then he was revolted.
So yeah, so I mean, it's like, ironically, right? It's like the most ancient story you could find. It's still about like, oh, real relationships are difficult. Like, why don't I sculpt a sculpture and ask God to give it life, right? So
Right.
that's hilarious.
Well, and that to me, that's the question of like what actually is lost. So let's say I had a rich social world where I interacted with, AI Einstein and AI Richard Feynman, and had, a hot AI bot, partner that was super smart and knew how to comfort me. And I went through my whole existence and my social needs were met. What's lost? To me, there's something in my heart that just hurts when I think about it. And yet I can't put my finger on it. To me, this points towards some of these more spiritual concepts. There is some connection between consciousness that arises. There is something that happens where mirror neurons fire, although maybe mirror neurons fire when you're looking at a bot that can emote the same way we do. So what's there?
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's also interesting that the emotional connection versus sexual needs, right? And those are obviously very related, but also like not always the same thing. So the question could also be, can you satisfy one with one type of entity and another with another? So analogous to the story that I just shared, I found the oldest story that I could find on the sex bot side is the story by Pliny the Elder, a Roman encyclopedist, and he writes about
What's
a
an
famous.
encyclopedist? Is
I
this like in the
suppose,
days before encyclopedia happened? You just would go speak to this guy?
or maybe he's the type of person who would write an encyclopedia, kind of research knowledge or something like. Actually, I'm not sure, but he writes a story about a famous nude statue that existed in 350 BCE, and this was a statue that used to arouse young men. So he took this statue and hid it in a shrine overnight and slept with it. and then and then he says he left a telltale stain on the marble. Ancient Romans, man. And yeah, so this it goes way back, right? And then coming to kind of like more closer timelines. There's a story of sailors, French and Spanish sailors from 16th and 17th centuries. They would like make like women out of their old clothes, and essentially dolls, right? And then they would call them Demes de Voyage, or travel ladies. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. And for companionship
Your
in
French could
long
use some
long
work.
sea voyages. And this became such a thing that among sailors, and they would craft them, and then eventually the Japanese sailors apparently would exchange leather puppets with Dutch sailors, and this is apparently how the Japanese term Dutch wives was born, and for sex dolls, and the phrase is still used today.
I find humor in how delighted you are by this.
Yeah, I mean, goes way back, and yeah, so then there's like all the stories from early 2000s to last few years, where I'm sure people have heard of, particularly Japanese individuals, getting married to sex dolls, and then having ceremonies. And in one case, someone got married to the character in their Nintendo DC game console, and then the priest read the terms of service as at the wedding ceremony.
Oh my gosh.
Um, but
Well,
then yeah, and then bring us real close to the present. The latest incarnation of this, companies like Character.ai and Replica, which I'm sure our listeners have heard of. These are products where you can go talk to a bot, and in Character.ai, we know that people have hour plus session lengths. People talk to these bots for hours, and with Replica, that was the interesting thing. Replica is an iPhone app where you can download, and then you can kind of have a virtual girlfriend, and I assume they have hundreds of thousands of users. And then in 2024, they kind of pulled back on the NSFW stuff that they were doing with this bot, at least like kind of made it less girlfriend like and so on. And but then like the user base was so upset that they had to post suicide prevention hotline numbers in their Reddit forums and stuff like that, because people were like heartbroken that their girlfriend's personality changed.
to me, there's another thing here that I've sort of found interesting, which is, there's this desire for immediate gratification, right? And it's like, oh, I can't get the gratification that I'm looking for in social interactions with humans, right? Or for whatever reason, I find that too hard. And there's an approach that some people take, like you and I, right? I mean, I think we can be honest that, for example, neither of us were very good at speaking to girls, right? And finding a partner was a challenge for us, and we leaned into that challenge, right? Figuring out how to improve ourselves, still be authentic to who we are, but how to communicate, how to be more emotionally intelligent, things like that, to deepen and strengthen human connections, and not just sexual connections, but also, how to have richer, more meaningful friendships. And one of the things that I've noticed is a larger pattern is that the things that I think most humans feel are the most precious things in life, they require time, they
Yeah.
require diligence and quiet cultivation, and they're almost by design don't have an immediate reward behind them. And so to me, the risk here is that because we can create these things like bots that provide that immediate gratification, whether it's relationship gratification, because it doesn't matter how you interact, there's no risk, right? You can yell and scream and rage at your AI, boyfriend, and it'll just be calm and just be there with you and still, never walk away.
Yeah.
We miss out on those things. And if you look at those things, what are those things? Like for health, it's exercise, right? Putting in the reps every day, meaningful relationships. It's this constant process of refinement, of trying to understand how can I be myself and communicate in a way that's rewarding others. Or if you look at sex, right, there's a choice of like the hedonic treadmill of constant novelty and variety, or tantric sex, where you get to, deeper, more pleasurable orgasms, but you have to go slowly. I mean, this is sort of.
You don't think there would be a tantric sex bot? I'm joking, but
no. You got me to think there. Well, no, maybe why not?
Yeah.
Why not? Right. And I think that is the interesting thing, because there are technologies like, for example, my meditation practice, where I bootstrap my way into the meditation practice by using a small piece of tech, right, that would appeal to my dopamine hit, right? I used the Insight Timer streak function to make sure that I meditated every day, and then once I had a 30-day streak, I didn't want to break it, right? So there are ways of doing it, but generally you don't get the big dopamine hit.
Yeah.
When you go for the deeper aspects of humanity.
Right. Yeah. So no, that's kind of relevant for not just relationships, but practically everything that you get with AI, right? It's just like there's this penultimate question around like, hey, does this make everything that we cherish, that we work hard to earn, a little too easy to get to the end goal? Because if it's always about the journey, and then you entirely miss out on the journey if it just like arrives on a platter. It's it's just like when you had to stop growing your own vegetables or whatever, and of course it was backbreaking work, but then it also was probably like very satisfying to do that in some sense, and then that's not an experience that we have anymore. So yeah, it is fascinating. It might also be worth it to think about what are the situations that this actually does make sense to rely on an AI for emotional support, right? And therapy and coaching is one easy one that anyone would mention. And one real story that I came across is just a few years ago in 2021. This is called Project December. San Francisco Chronicle ran a story of someone who created using GPT-3. They created a simulation of their fiance, and their fiance had passed unexpectedly, and it was like devastating and heartbreaking, and and then after his fiance passed, he had now several months that he could talk to the GPT model of his fiance to kind of make it easier to let go, right? And he said that it really helped him say goodbye to his fiance who tragically passed away. And so that seemed like a really perfect, beautiful use case for creating an AI replica of a living human, even, and then having a relationship with them.
And to me, this is like, we're on this razor knife edge, right? Where we can use AI to help to realize our full potential, right? To realize our full humanness and help us have deeper connection, right? Like, I think we're not far away from a world where if I have an argument or a disconnect with my partner that we're unable to resolve, we could have our AI agents talk to each other and help figure stuff out.
Yeah.
Right. And then come back and talk with us. And it's like, imagine if you had a therapist coach that was in both partners' brains all the time and because all that's going on is our little scared inner humans freak out. Oh, they're not going to meet my needs, and I need that need in order to feel safe and loved and free, and vice versa. And we get angry and play out our little traumas. It can solve that stuff, and have a level of detail and specificity that maybe wasn't possible, and be able to talk both sides down. Right. Yeah. So I think there's that amazing side. And then there's the other side of just sort of indulging our humanness and indulging us in our limitations and then reinforcing it. Right. And I think the closest proxy to this is you can see this with a lot of ultra wealthy people that instead of sort of dealing with their uncomfortable emotions, they can use money to buy themselves out of it. Right. Like you and I had a friend that every time he felt uncomfortable, he would just buy a first class ticket somewhere else and just change his reality. So to me, it could go either way, and probably it's going to do both.
And there's a lot of responsibility now would fall on corporations who both create these AIs and essentially own the IP to these AIs to a large degree, right? And so it could be the foundation model creator, but also it could be that whatever company that creates the actual character that kind of fine tunes it and creates a prompt and all that stuff. There is a world where hopefully we can align the incentives of these corporations that own these characters to push closer and closer, or more and more towards AIs that are actually good for people. Because there's like, there's no preventing people interacting with AIs. There's no preventing people from bonding emotionally with AIs. What we can do and should be doing is hopefully we're building better for you, good for you AIs, as opposed to just like, get you hooked as much as possible type AIs.
And to me, this is one of the core theses that I have, is that what you're speaking about is trust, right? Trust that whoever is building the AI is in service of the individual, right? And this is sort of my own. I'm forgetting the word. What is it with when the doctor takes the oath? It's sort of my own coaching.
Yeah.
Yes. So to me, my coaching oath is that I exist in my coaching relationship with my clients in service of them becoming the best versions of themselves, however they define it, not how Ben Tauber defines it, right? And so hopefully they walk away more capable of living their best life on their own terms and able to give their gifts to humanity, whatever they are. And I think we're going to see that trust and those values will be one of the core differentiators, because once we're at a point where there's artificial super intelligence that's hyper persuasive, right? Like I'll feel frightened of going on Amazon and interacting with a bot that I know is so smart that, getting back to our earlier point, could persuade me to buy anything. Right? Like, do I want to go to that, or do I want to go to an agent where the financial incentives of that agent are fully aligned with who I want to be.
That's a really great point. I think what you're saying is that in a future where everything's abundant, or everything production of whatever you want is abundant, trust is going to play an even bigger role, because you just fundamentally be able to trust the source, right? And this is actually very, very, very analogous to what's happening with podcasts as the primary medium for news consumption and spreading of knowledge, because we used to rely on newspapers, and then it became really trivial to start newspapers and propagate all kinds of media stories through all kinds of channels. And now the reality we're seeing is that people are tuning into specific podcast personalities as their trusted authorities on news, and the very similar pattern can play out with the AIs and AI related products that you trust as well.
Absolutely. And so I think that this will grow in an exponential way, where sort of like trust has taken a back seat to other things like convenience, but convenience is no longer going to be a differentiator, right? Because all the AIs will be able to do it. So one of my predictions, and I could totally be wrong here, but just to throw it out, is that we're going to have a preference and select potentially 1 to 3 agents that we fully trust, that will be our interfaces into all the other agents that are out there, because we know that their incentives are aligned with ours, right? Like I won't need to go to Amazon. I'll speak to my AI agent and just say like, hey, monitor everything in my house and buy me goods that are safe for my son, safe for me, and at affordable prices, and just solve that. And then it will go out and do that and find products that don't have lead in them and all that sort of stuff. Whereas some other entity, might go, oh, well, like Amazon might go, well, we can sell them the one that's slightly less healthy. It's only 5% less healthy and maybe reduces life expectancy by a year, but our margin is 20% better. And that really serves our, our shareholders.
Yeah.
Right. So I think there's a world where we potentially have that agent.
Yeah. And I'm personally very excited about this from a kind of a product and company point of view. At my company System 2, we're thinking about moving heavily in this direction as well, in building AIs that are like genuinely good for you, and just like every interaction we try to make you a better human, make your adapt to your needs, and really kind of like guide you towards a better life kind of thing, because we're a fitness and wellness focused company anyway, so there's a lot of that that is quite exciting.
Yeah. Well, and to me, that is the, if you go off the other side of the knife edge from the indulging all of our short-term addictive habits, that's the part that's exciting, which is I think there's an opportunity that's emerging now for us to realize our fullest human potential.
Yeah.
Right. And that we can use the exponential growth of technology to vault ourselves to levels that we've never seen before, which is a precursor to our hack of the week, which I'll be excited to share with you.
All right. Do you think that there's a potential dark side at the end of this direction, where like everyone's like too ripped and like everyone's like having too good sex all the time, and it's like, oh fuck, like, everything's just too good, everyone's too good looking?
I don't know. Well, or arguably what it does is it really helps us to, become enlightened, right? And and do that much. And then we don't care about being ripped because we're, digitally ripped, or I don't know.
Ripped and enlightened is better than just enlightened, right?
Well, and this is a question. Sign up with System 2, but do you trust Dylan that ripped is the most important thing for you? I mean, to me, I think these are the deeper questions. And to me, one of the things that really is dangerous, I mean, this is a bigger question, is, the folks that think they know what is right, are they actually a bigger threat to humanity than folks that are willing to sit and decide that they don't know? It's sort of like, do you want the leader who is hungry to lead, or do you want the leader that's reluctant to lead?
Yeah, ultimately, the classic and best way to solve this is likely through diversity of options, open source, market dynamics, and so on. So, this is this is why capitalism essentially has done better than communism, right? So we just want competition in that space.
Well, I mean, there's an interesting challenge here, though, right? Because when social media addiction we were becoming aware of it, but it hadn't been talked about. I mean, I was at Google working on their social products, working with teams of PhD statisticians and empirically testing what would bring people into the product. I realized that we were studying the science of addiction, and there's this really nuanced challenge that when it goes into the glossy headlines of media gets lost, which is, let's say I have a product and I fundamentally want to make people better, right? And there are certain types of things that I could do that would make the product stickier, a little more addictive. You would come back to it, but also I was a little bit manipulative. Should I use those? Because someone else could come along who doesn't have the same positive inclination and use those more addictive techniques and become more successful. So we were having sort of a summit talking about this, and it was like, well, if we dial back on the addictive nature of Instagram, will it get replaced by some Chinese company that does it even better? And now here we have TikTok, and there are arguments the algorithms are actually different between the Chinese market and the US market, where the US market is designed to send things that make you a little bit dumber, where the Chinese market, the algorithm is designed to send things that make the population smarter.
I would take the other side of this argument. This to me, what happened in social media, in fact, is one of the best stories of how human ingenuity and human orientation towards becoming better far outweighs our own sort of pessimism on kind of how everything's getting bad and kind of like doomerism, right? And the reason why I say that is because if you look at the story of social media, the breakout when we started first building social media products, 2011 timeframe, Arab Spring happened, and everyone was like very hopeful about social media, bringing the world together, creating new friendships and so on, right? And then that story flipped in around 2015, 2016, 2017. The U.S. election, the Russian interference story, which was largely prone to be false, and so on, and everyone became extremely concerned about social media manipulation, addiction to all these products like Facebook and so on, right? But to me, what has happened today is that people build antibodies in a lot of cases, right? And what happened was that people, at least a good cohort of people, stopped trusting social media as their sort of like primary information source, and just like we were talking about now, podcasts that essentially have, you could argue, a different optimization function, where when you listen to a podcast, you're really trying to get to know the person rather than like kind of like listen to a bunch of facts kind of thing, which is an interesting dynamic that is replacing social media. And one could argue that it's a sort of like a corrective function towards like removing that messiness that came with social media and misinformation spreading and stuff like that, right? Now, there are many different takes on this. There's like that we will not find consensus among people whether the ill effects of social media have gone away or not. But I would, to me, it if you ask me in 2016, what is the one problem in the world that I don't know how to solve or I don't see a solution in the future, is I would have said it's social media, because the incentives are structured such that, like you're just saying, more eyeballs, the more you get paid. But from 2025, looking backwards, I would say, wow, like we built antibodies. A lot of us stopped using social media that way, right? Like you and I don't nearly use Facebook, etc., nearly as much. And a lot of people in our circles don't, right? Now, of course, you can talk about isolated communities, like our parents, what are their behaviors, and young kids. And I'd imagine even with kids, they're probably building natural antibodies, and generations that will kind of natively grow up with these mediums might behave differently. And yeah, the TLDR is that I am far more impressed with how much humanity collectively figured out ways to counter the negative effects of social media almost organically. Even though those incentives for more eyeballs leading to more money never went away. And Dylan 2025 is far more optimistic about that problem than Dylan 2016 is what I'd say.
Well, and I appreciate that view. I would want to look at the data around it. Because I agree with that trend, right? And so it's sort of, if I were to summarize what you're saying, it's sort of like life finds a way.
Yeah.
Right. No matter, it's like the tree, figures out how to adapt. Plants can, figure out how to grow. Like it will find a way through these challenges.
And often the reason why we panic is that we zoom in and we look at micro timelines and micro trends, and oh shit, like over the last 3 years, this thing is dropping or increasing or whatever, and that's really concerning. But when you zoom out, this is the thing about kind of like human progress. When you zoom out, almost every single trend is up to the right, the way we want it. That doesn't mean that we should not be cautious, obviously, but etc. That's not the lesson here. The lesson here is that the world is in so many ways getting better a lot more than it's getting worse. So we are really good at solving these problems.
This comes down to, on a person by person basis, deciding, do you want to be better?
Yeah.
Right. Like there's a level of personal responsibility that happens, right? And when you think about people of addiction, right, like 12-step programs and things like that, it's like acknowledging that you have a challenge, and then you move through a process where you take responsibility for that. And to me, the stakes are getting higher. Like the level of addictiveness of all these things is going up on one side. And so as you grow your awareness, you have to choose the other way. And I think some people are choosing that, right? Like there's ways that we can use AI and bots and all this stuff to make the most incredible world for humanity. And so towards that end, I realize we're coming up on time here. Do we want to talk about the last topic here, or just jump right into the hack of the week?
Well, let's quickly talk about the last topic. It's just a fun little story. The world's first humanoid half marathon took place in Beijing last week, where 21 humanoid robots ran a half marathon alongside humans, and only 6 out of the 21 humanoids completed the course. The one that won actually was developed using it's a Chinese government affiliated research firm that built this. Finished the half marathon in 2 hours and 40 minutes, which is very slow. It's like kind of like a
twice the speed, more than twice the speed of the human. I think the human won in like an hour 4 minutes.
Yeah. But yeah, and then there was some hilarious videos that came out of this as well. But the point is, we couldn't, we probably didn't have a humanoid that could compete in such a feat 5 years ago. I don't know if there were any one, maybe like one or two, and then now there are like a bunch of startups building these things, and in no time they'll be way faster than humans and all probably animals as well. So and then I'm looking forward to, Ben, the robot Olympics, right? Like the humanoid Olympics or whatever. That would be very entertaining. That's definitely going to be a category of media.
There's a
In the near future.
prediction, right? The humanoid that makes sense to me, right? This is the first of things coming, and it
Yeah,
sounds like I'm going to be a broken record here, right?
yeah,
That exponential growth. I mean, next year we're going to see way more of them finish. We're going to see times go down, and
yeah.
eventually we're going to see them beating robots. Now, I think one thing that I think was sort of amusing is that that this robot that won required 3 battery changes. It's like I was like, it's sort of like if my dad ran a marathon, right? He needed like a kidney transplant in the middle, like
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, and then the last one, I tried to write some amusing headlines for this. The best one I came up with, they were all pretty bad, is that it turns out the winning bot though was stripped of its title because it was caught vaping WD-40 in between.
The first robotic doping scandal.
Right, exactly.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Apparently they overclocked the CPU.
Yeah,
Not allowed.
yeah. All right. Should we go to the hack of the week?
Yes. All right. So the hack of the week is sort of built on your hack of the week last week, right? So last week you could ask OpenAI, now that it had a new memory function that turned on based on everything that it knew about you, what your blind spots were. So that was pretty cool. And so building on that, I then asked OpenAI to create a development path for me to turn me into a 0.1% brain. So essentially, like grow my IQ. And so
Right.
it put together a plan for me, and I'm going to share some of that plan with you right now. So so to increase IQ over 145, which would be 0.1%, right? Here are the things to do. So upgrading brain health. So it says 3 to 4 times a week vigorous aerobic blocks, because this increases memory in adults within 8 weeks. Sleep, 7.5 to 9 hours a week. Mediterranean diet plus a gram of DHAA, 5 grams of creatine protein. And then now it gets into more interesting stuff. So banking cognitive reserve for the long game. So you need to spend your life doing new skill acquisition on a regular basis. Also, in particular, maintain dense social networks and bonds there. Also, to push plasticity, it recommends adding beginner cycles. So every 6 months, you have to pick a domain of something that you're completely incompetent in, and then practice. And it quotes until it hurts. So on and on. It has a whole blueprint for me, and I'm planning to develop this out into a multi-year program for me to track growth.
Seems like a lot of work. Can I just like invent a pill instead or something?
Yeah. Well, can you work on that for us? Just
Yeah,
the
yeah.
pill
I got it too. But
the
I
brain
actually
extension.
I ended up spending my Sunday. I went to a hot springs and kind of wanted to take the day off. Already take space to think, and I spent the whole day talking to GPT-3 O3, and kind of like having a back and forth conversation about how to improve my life and very tactical things like how to create more thinking space, how to get more help, how to delegate better, and so on, right? And that was like such a useful exercise. And so I would highly encourage listeners to really use O3 especially, but in general AI as like it's at the point where you can use it as a very intelligent companion slash therapist that you can really use to help improve the functionality of your life. So yeah, it's really great.
Absolutely. And to be clear, I don't, even though that sounds like a lot of work, I don't think there was a single thing I listed that you don't already do,
That's
Dylan.
actually true. Yeah. But my life is a lot of work, man.
Well, this explains your IQ.
Yeah. So on that note, folks, that's it for this week. Please subscribe on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, or wherever, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc., and support us and let us know how we can do better. And we'll see you next week.